particular bill is Parliament itself. It is these members of Parliament in their various committees, Mr. Speaker, who struggle with all these challenges and difficulties. It is these same senators, Mr. Speaker, that when they envision a legislative proposal, have to go through the challenges of writing to the Speaker, being told it is being cleared by the office of the Director, legislative administration. After that, Mr. Speaker, it has to go to Parliamentary Budget Office to go through the checks of Article 114, whether it is a money bill or not, then concurrence from the two speakers, a long, tedious procedure that is not provided with empirical procedures, Mr. Speaker, that a member can know from the onset to know what is it that you can include and what can't you include in a bill, Mr. Speaker, to guide you as you draft legislation, so that you avoid going through a particular legislation, then eventually you are told that this bill has fallen through the cracks and the roofs of Parliament, the rigors of it, because either it is a money bill or there was no concurrence granted from the other house, Mr. Speaker. This is our opportunity to provide it in legislation, so that when a member sits to partake their constitutional mandate of oversighting, of legislating, of representation, Mr. Speaker, it is properly guided. And I say this, and I want to repeat when the members of Justice and Legal Affairs Committee are here. Because when I said it, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, it's only the chair who's there. But today I know there are many members of Justice and Legal Affairs. I know when they sat down, Mr. Speaker, they deliberated and said, we want to kill the bill at second reading. I have spoken on that particular matter many times, Mr. Speaker, and I have said it is an abuse of legislative privilege to destroy any bill at second reading, Mr. Speaker. Because there is nowhere that you are stopped, Mr. Speaker, from receiving a bill that has 5 to 10 pages and completely removing everything that is in that particular bill and coming up with your own bill anew. If we are allowed to change, Mr. Speaker, even the heading of a bill, what can you change in a bill of Parliament, Mr. Speaker? Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I want to urge our colleagues who serve in Justice and Legal Affairs Committee to use this opportunity that we have to relook into this bill, Mr. Speaker. Listen to the views that were shared by all the members, because I listened to almost 15 members speak to this particular bill in the last 2 weeks, Mr. Speaker, on their proposals, what they think needs to be made better, what they think needs to be deleted altogether, what they think, Mr. Speaker, must feature in a proper bicameral relation between two houses of Parliament, Mr. Speaker, as is the practice established elsewhere. Because this constitution of ours, Mr. Speaker, did not fall from the sky. There are other jurisdictions where bicameral relations exist. If those countries or jurisdictions, Mr. Speaker, have been able to manage this bill, this bicameral process, Mr. Speaker, to a point where the legislative agenda works, then it can surely work in Kenya. We can define it and make it even better, because you don't have to mimic or ape any institution or jurisdiction, Mr. Speaker. We can come up with our own legislation. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, it is my sincere hope that Justice and Legal Affairs Committee will guide us in the right direction, that they will help us a house, Mr. Speaker, either I don't know whether it is later this week or eventually over the recess period, because I know at the end, at the rise of the House on Thursday this week, Mr. Speaker, eventually we shall proceed on a 3-week recess period. That should be sufficient time for them, such that when we resume, Mr. Speaker, we will find and be properly guided as a House and told that this is a procedure and the move that we expect, Mr. Speaker, on this particular matter. I want to request, Mr. Speaker, finally, that if there are senators, because I don't see how you can serve in this House, Mr. Speaker, and not have a say on such an important bill. And because many, maybe for one reason or the other, may not have known the importance of this bill, Mr. Speaker, then they should take the time and the trouble to write to Justice and Legal Affairs Committee and inform their views on that particular debate, on this particular bill, how it needs to move, Mr. Speaker, so that eventually when we convene to do committee of the whole, Mr. Speaker, eventually there will be good reason and good logic, Madam Speaker, on how we view things. Otherwise, Mr. Speaker, and I said this the other day when I was moving this bill, that it is not for lack of jurisdiction, that the Supreme Court has urged us more than 2 or 3 times that as a House sit down and give us a bill or a guide through which we can consider this legislation, Mr. Speaker, and has granted that opportunity, appearing as if they are not even willing to give us a decision on the matters that are before them. Then we will be passing on our own responsibility, something that we can sit down, Mr. Speaker, and agree on to be determined by other people. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, as a good student of history, this is a golden opportunity, which I don't want us to waste. I want us to use it, Mr. Speaker, for the betterment of this House, so that those that will serve in this House in the years to come will thank this, the Fourth Senate, Mr. Speaker, for finally resorting or restoring the dignity of this House to where it ought to have been, to see something greater than even what our constitutional drafters saw in Naivasha, Mr. Speaker, when they drafted the Senate as it is today, Mr. Speaker. With those very many remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to reply and thank all the members that have taken time to speak to this. Thank you. Pursuant to Standing Order number 66.3, I want to request that deferment of the question be put to another day. I thank you.
It is so ordered. Clerk, you may proceed to call the next order.
Order number 10, the Meteorology Bill, Senate Bills number 45 of 2023, second reading division.
Sergeant at Arms, ring the quorum bell for 5 minutes.
It is now a 5-minute division bell currently on at the Senate before the House votes on the Meteorology Bill 2023. The debate on this bill is already concluded. The Meteorology Bill 2023 is an act of Parliament that seeks to provide for the establishment of the Kenya Meteorological Service Authority regulation, coordination, monitoring, management, provision, as well as control of meteorological services, and for the connected purposes. A deeper look at the Meteorology Bill 2023 is a bill that seeks to put in place a legislative framework to regulate the meteorological services in Kenya and to coordinate as well as monitor meteorological services. The bill proposes the establishment of the Kenya Meteorological Service Authority, which shall be responsible for the provision, regulation, coordination, and management of meteorological services. This being a bill that has been debated by the House. When senators were debating this particular bill, the senators most importantly called for the establishment of meteorological departments across the 47 counties to guide Kenyans on matters to do with weather patterns, to reduce cases of Kenyans being caught unawares, such as it happened with the recent floods. Clause 1 to Clause 4 of the bill provides for the preliminary provisions in outlining the purpose as well as objective of the bill, which includes, among others, fulfilling Kenya's international obligations under the Convention of the World Meteorological Organization and the International Civil Aviation Organization. Upon the passage of this bill on matters to do with meteorology, there will be establishment of the Kenya Meteorological Service Authority that will be having functions and powers. The functions of the authority include establishment and maintenance of surface, upper air, marine meteorological observation networks, establishment as well as maintenance of the integrated informational systems for the exchange of meteorological data and products, data processing as well as archival, forecasting, product dissemination, including provision of aeronautical meteorological services for matters safety, regularity, and efficiency of the international air navigation in the line with Annex 2 and 3 to the Convention of International Civil Aviation Organization. The bill also provides for the management of the authority by a board of directors appointed under Clause 9 of this bill, and Clause 10 sets out the qualification of the person and the chairperson as well as the members of the board. Finally, the functions of the board include overseeing as well as implementation of meteorology, and sets out provisions relating to the tenure of office, vacancy of the office, meetings by the board, as well as remuneration, among others. Upon the passage of this particular bill, the bill also seeks to have the Meteorology Training Institute Research Directorate established, and this directorate shall be the successor of the Institute of Meteorological Training and Research, IMTR, and the designated World Meteorological Organization Regional Tourism Center for the provision of matters to do with diploma, certificate, and professional courses in meteorology, operational and hydrology, as well as related sciences.
Honorable Senators, the 5 minutes are completed. Majority Leader, Majority and Minority Leader, kindly take your seats. Sergeant at Arms, close the door and draw the bar. Senator Omtata, kindly take your seat. I want to proceed to put the question, please. Honorable Senators, I'll proceed to put the question, which is the Meteorology Bill, Senate Bills number 45 of 2023, be now read a second time. Now, Honorable Senators, we're going to vote electronically. I'm informed that Senator Ogola, you're voting for and on behalf of Homa Bay delegation, and Senator Mariam, you're voting for and on behalf of that's Mandera County delegation. So you may proceed to vote where you are. You don't have to be called to dispatch when the voting times comes. Now, Honorable Senators, I'm asking you to log out and pull your cards from the delegate unit. Sergeant at Arms, please pick any card that has been left unattended to still in the delegate unit. Okay, you may now log back, Honorable Senators, kindly. Log back and proceed to vote. Honorable Senators, the results of the division are as follows. Ayes 26, nays 1, abstention 0. So the ayes have it.
A bill for an act of parliament to provide for the establishment of the Kenya Meteorological Services Authority, regulation, coordination, monitoring, management, provision, and control of meteorological services and for connected purposes.
Now, before we call the next order, I would like to acknowledge the presence in the public gallery this afternoon, visiting teachers and students from All Saints Karambari Secondary School in Embu County. The delegation is in the Senate for a one-day academic exposition. Honorable Senators, in our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming guests to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to them, and on behalf of the Senate and my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. I will call upon the Senator for Embu, Senator Mundigi, to extend the word of welcome under 1 minute.
Asante Bwana Spika kwa kunipa ruhusa niweze kukaribisha wanafunzi wa chuo ya Karambari na Mbarwari ambaye wamekuja kutembea kujifunza yale tunafanya hapa katika Senate. Ni kuambia karibu hapa Senate, sisi tunajifunza kusungumuza vile hii Senate nyumba ya juu inasungumuza mambo ya county government na vile pesa tukipata vile inaenda kwa county government, vile county government itafanya kazi ndio iweze kwenda masinani, mambo ya hospitali, mambo ya kilimo, mambo ya afya na mambo zingine, hata mambo ya elimu. Kwa hivyo nataka nimhakikishie mkijifunza vizuri na mkae vizuri, msikie mambo ile mnafunzwa katika shule, hata nyinyi mtakuwa viongozi wa kesho, mtakuwa maseneta, mtakuwa hata magavana, mkitii sheria ambaye inataikana. Yangu ni machache, ni kusema karibuni sana. Hiyo ingine ningeomba pia serikali ile tunaongea hapa ni vile tungependa huko Embu County hii shule bali imetoka hakuna maji, hakuna nini, hata hakuna stima. Serikali ya Kenya Kwanza iangalie shule kama hizo ndio waweze kujifunza kama zile zingine katika nchi yetu ya Kenya. Ni asante Bwana Spika. Mkienda Embu mseme mnakizwa vizuri na senator wenu wa Embu County. Asante. Asante Bwana Spika.
Next order.
Order number 11, the National Construction Authority Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bills number 59 of 2022, second reading division.
Senator Mtata, the distribution of water has never been part of the mandate of a senator. I'll proceed to put the question, which is that the National Construction Authority Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bills number 59 of 2022, be now read a second time. Now, we need not go through the procedure as adopted in the first division. Honorable Senators, just proceed to log in and vote. Voting is electronically. Senator Oburu, kindly proceed to the dispatch and cast your vote. Honorable Senators, the result for the division are as follows. Ayes 26, nays 1, abstention 0. So the ayes have it.
A bill for an act of parliament to amend the National Construction Authority Act and for connected purposes.
Next order.
Order number 12, the Nuts and Oil Crops Development Bill, Senate Bills number 47 of 2023, second reading division.
Honorable Senators, I'll proceed to put the question, which is that the Nuts and Oil Crops Development Bill, Senate Bills number 47 of 2022, be now read a second time. Honorable Senators, you may now proceed to vote. Order, Honorable Senators. Senator Mtata, kindly take a seat. Thank you. The results of the division are as follows. Ayes 27, nay 0, abstention 0. The ayes have it.
A bill for an act of parliament to provide for the production, processing, marketing, and distribution of nuts and oil crops and their products, establish the Nuts and Oil Crops Board, provide a framework for the nuts and oil crops farming, development, and for connected purposes.
Next order, Clerk.
Order number 13, the Cancer Prevention and Control Amendment Bill. National Assembly Bills number 45 of 2022, second reading division.
Honorable Senators, I will proceed to put the question, which is that the Cancer Prevention and Control Amendment Bill number 2, National Assembly Bills number 45 of 2022, be now read a second time. You may now proceed to vote. Senator Methu. Order. Honorable Senators, the results of the division are as follows. The ayes 27, the nays 0, and abstention 0. So the ayes have it.
A bill for an act of Parliament to amend the Cancer Prevention and Control Act and for connected purposes.
Sergeant at Arms, you may now proceed to withdraw the bar and open the door. Next order, Clerk. We had deferred an earlier order, so we will proceed to call that order, and thereafter we will resume normal flow as contained in the order paper. That was order number 8.
Order number 8, motion. The second report of the Procedure and Rules Committee on the review of the standing orders of the Senate.
Senator Wakili.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the Vice Chairperson of Procedure and Rules Committee, I beg to move the motion that pursuant to Standing Order 267, 268, and 270, the Senate approves the second report of the Procedure and Rules Committee on the review of the standing orders of the Senate laid on the table of the Senate on Wednesday, 22nd of May, 2024, and that pursuant to the provisions. Mr. Speaker, can I be protected, Mr. Speaker?
Order, honorable members. May the senator be heard in silence, please.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I will recap that pursuant to the standing orders 267, 268, and 270, the Senate approves the second report of the Procedure and Rules Committee on the review of the standing orders of the Senate laid on the table of the Senate on Wednesday, 22nd of May, 2024, and that pursuant to the provisions of Article 1241 of the Constitution and Standing Orders 270 and 272, resolves 1, to resolve to amend its standing orders as contained in Annexure 1 of the report, and 2, orders that the amendments to the standing orders as contained in Annex 1 to the report come into effect on the 25th of June 2024. Mr. Speaker, a highlight of this particular motion as I move is to indicate to the House that several requests came in through the members of this House on their proposals to amend the standing orders of this House. This was committed to the Procedure and Rules Committee, which received these proposals. And among the members who submitted proposals for amendment, Mr. Speaker, included Senator Eddie Okech, whose proposals I will in a few paragraphs comment on, Senator Miraj Abdullahi, Senator Fatuma Dulo, and those which were moved on its motion by the Liaison Committee on the structure of statements of members, particularly on oversight committees, which sought to introduce Committee on Implementation and the designation of a position of chairperson. Mr. Speaker, in its meetings of 2nd of May 2024, 9th of May 2024, the Procedure and Rules Committee considered the proposals which were made by members, particularly with the need to make sure that the request for amendments for those proposals which the committee deemed appropriate in the circumstances and came up with various recommendations. And for those which were approved, Mr. Speaker, for amendment are as follows. First, Mr. Speaker, is the amendment to provisions of Standing Order number 42 of the Standing Orders of this House. And Standing Order 42, Mr. Speaker, provides for the quorum during voting in the House. And the committee, Mr. Speaker, approved that the Standing Order number 42 of the Senate as presently provides be deleted and replaced by the following: that before taking an electronic vote, roll call, division, or a voice vote, the Speaker or chairperson of the Committee of the Whole shall cause accounts to be taken of senators present in the Senate or the committee. And under 2, if the requisite quorum is present, division or voting shall be proceeded with, or B, not present, Standing Order 41(2) shall apply. That is, we will defer the vote. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, this standing order shall not apply to the process of voting on procedural motion. Mr. Speaker, what informed this particular approval of the proposed amendment is situations where we would experience in the course of seeking to vote where we have got less than 10 members in the House. And when we are going for a voice vote, it is impossible or might not be possible to clearly establish whether the ayes or the nays have had. And the committee, in the course of its consideration, was given an incident where the House had less than the numbers that would have given a clear position on the vote, and the committee indeed found merit in this particular proposal, hence the approval to amend the provisions of Standing Order 42 on the quorum during division or voting. The second approval, Mr. Speaker, that the committee made was the provisions of Standing Order number 131. And Mr. Speaker, allow me to just highlight for purposes of the members the appreciation of what Standing Order 131 provides. This is actually the requirement on pre-publication scrutiny. Mr. Speaker, whenever a committee is committed to undertake any pre-publication scrutiny, the provisions of the standing order as currently is under 131(1) requires the committee to either examine the proposal, seek reviews of the sponsor and those of the relevant cabinet secretary or any other person who is likely going to have an impact or be impacted by the pre-publication of that particular proposal or legislative proposal. And the committee under 131(1)(b) can also make suggestions for purposes of either enriching the particular legislative proposal. Mr. Speaker, as is right now, 131(1)(a) and (b) uses the conjunction or, meaning a committee is only required either to examine or to suggest variations. The committee, Mr. Speaker, approved the proposal to amend so that the committee, when it is considering a legislative proposal prior to publication, can undertake both of them. That is, it can examine the proposal, it can seek the review, and in addition to that, rather than using the conjunction or, uses and, so that the two can become the mandate with which the committee is expected to do. Mr. Speaker, the third proposal, which the committee also approved, which I also feel it's important for honorable members to appreciate, is an approval to the amendment of Standing Order 228. Previously, Mr. Speaker, the House has been invited on a number of occasions to introduce the establishment of an implementation committee. And on a number of occasions, members have invited the Speaker and the House leadership to establish that committee. However, the proposal to the amendment to the Standing Order 228 is to give the mandate to a particular standing committee that is involved in a subject matter to have a responsibility to follow up and report on the status of the committees made, of the commitments made by the committee or by any government entity, institution, or cabinet secretary in response to the questions. This, Mr. Speaker, is also going to respond and answer to the question that what happens to the recommendations the committees have made, what happens to a follow-up on the responses that the cabinet secretaries who ordinarily are now required to appear before the House to respond to the questions. The committee made an insightful proposal and approved the recommendation that instead of establishing an additional committee on implementation, the relevant committee, and for obvious reasons, Mr. Speaker, if it is about the Committee on Agriculture, they are the people who are best suited to understand the subject matter, they have interrogated the issues, and they understand beyond mere understanding of the subject, and that is why as they follow up for implementation, they are capable of ensuring that the recommendations of that particular committee on that particular question are followed to make sure that the relevant government agency, cabinet secretary, or government institution implements the recommendations of the committee. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, the Standing Order 237 of the House is also proposed to be amended by deleting that particular standing order. Standing Order 237, Mr. Speaker, allows for comments, observations, or clarifications by members of the House whenever a petition is filed and is committed to a particular committee. Previously, Mr. Speaker, there has been challenges as to whether or not a decision of a committee on a petition, a recommendation of a committee on a petition is of value to the House. And this proposal to delete the provisions of Standing Order 237 is informed by the amendments which have been approved to Standing Order 238, where against the current provision where members upon committal of a report to the committee will have no opportunity to comment. In this case, a committee report on a petition will be subjected to the debate of the House. Members will deliberate because it will be dealt with as if it is a motion rather than a report being tabled. So when we delete provisions of Standing Order 237, we propose to further amend 238 so that we now give members of the House the opportunity to comment on recommendations of a committee. And this is what the proposed Standing Order 238 will read, that whenever a petition is committed to a standing committee, the committee shall in not more than 60 calendar days from the time of reading the prayer, table its report to the Senate for consideration. The key word here is it will be tabled for consideration by the members. And therefore, as a matter of procedure, members now, we will not need the provisions of Standing Order 237 because it becomes superfluous by virtue of the fact that members have been allowed to deal with that report on Standing Order 238 by the issue of the report or recommendation being dealt with as a motion. And secondly, the Senate is expected under Standing Order 238B, or rather C as amended, the Senate shall consider a report under paragraph 2 within 14 sitting days of its tabling. This, Mr. Speaker, is aimed at ensuring that we do not leave out recommendations of various committees on reports to gather dust in the shelves, and that is why a timeline is provided for members to make sure that they deal with it, and a follow-up, as of course previously amended under Standing Order 228, will be followed by the relevant committee that had been committed that particular petition to deal with. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, Standing Order 239 is proposed to be amended. Standing Order 239 provides for copies of responses. This is responses to the petition as has been filed, and the committee is proposing that the petitioner is supposed to be notified of the decision or the recommendation of the committee, and the clerk of the Senate is mandated under the newly proposed amendments to Standing Order 239 to communicate within 14 days of the resolution of the Senate under Standing Order 238 in writing, so that the petitioner himself, herself, whether it was in person or an institution, is informed of that decision, and they will be able to follow up to ensure that if it is something that ought to be implemented, they will support the committee that is relevant to that particular issue to follow up for implementation. Mr. Speaker, there are additional other recommendations that proposals that members had made, but the committee in its wisdom considered, and some were rejected because they are already provided for by the standing orders, and the eventual effect was not to agree to the proposal for amendment. And Mr. Speaker, I wish to ask the honorable members to approve of this amendment as they contribute to them. This is aimed at enriching the debate in the House. It's aimed at ensuring that members are also involved, particularly with regard to the proposed amendment to how we deal with petitions in the House, how we deal with aspects on voting, as to make sure at any given time, prior to a decision being taken by the House, there is a confirmation that we have sufficient members in the House to undertake the vote and ensure that the vote carries as is required. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, as I ask members to look and approve on this proposal, I would wish to present this particular report, and Mr. Speaker, I move. I thank you.
Who is seconding your motion?
Ask the Honorable Senator from Nandi to second.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Senator Wakili Hilary Sigei. Mr. Speaker, I want to second by saying it has reached a point that we now need to clean up our own standing orders, Mr. Speaker, because what guides this House, Mr. Speaker, is normally our standing orders, which in essence has originated from the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. So, Speaker, I'm happy. I want to make 3 comments to allow my colleagues, and I can see Senator Ofiga is seeing me with excitement, Mr. Speaker, is that I want to say 2 things. One is on the issue of amending on supplementary questions. Mr. Speaker, when we amended under the new standing order on appearance of cabinet secretaries for question and answer time, Mr. Speaker, members have felt that asking only 1 supplementary question with the root of the issue that came up, Mr. Speaker, has always been a challenge. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I agree that let members ask questions, in fact, from the entire ministry. And I'm happy, for example, I can use one minister that came here, Governor, Cabinet Secretary Salim Vuria. We were able to ask him a written of questions, and he was able to answer comfortably without saying that question was not part of the supplementary, part of the original question. He was comfortable, Mr. Speaker. My belief, and the belief of members, Mr. Speaker, is that if you are in charge of a docket, you must have at least an overview of your docket where you are. And the retired judge, minority leader, will tell you in law school, and yourself, you know, you think on your feet. the essence of engaging, Mr. Speaker. So I want to agree that let members be allowed to ask supplementary questions. That's the essence. Even when you look at Commonwealth parliamentary system, even in Britain and many others that practice question time for prime ministers or cabinet secretaries, Mr. Speaker, is very important. Number two, Mr. Speaker, on the issue of removing statements, Mr. Speaker, I would have also requested, but I want to agree that I think your office, so that we don't appear brutal, is not to drop statements, but at least in consultation with the ministers, Mr. Speaker, not ministers, senators are out, Mr. Speaker, it is important that they liaise with your office. For example, Mr. Speaker, if the senator is not in the House, Mr. Speaker, is it possible to liaise with your office so that their statements, if you have given them official permission, maybe they are traveling outside the country or county visits through parliamentary visits, Mr. Speaker, is it possible to get permission from you? Then you don't have to schedule such statements. But any senator whose statements have been scheduled and they have not given you indication, then I agree with the amendment that they must seek leave. Mr. Speaker, I think in future when we amend these standing orders, in my wisdom or lack of it, Mr. Speaker, we should at least include bills and motions, Mr. Speaker, because there are bills that have stayed. And I remember there is one member, Mr. Speaker, the other day when I was moving my bill, argued that, one senator argued that, why are we prioritizing National Assembly bills? But when you look at the order paper, Mr. Speaker, the members who are supposed to move their bills and motions were not in the House. It happened coincidentally that the bill that was being moved originated from National Assembly. So I don't know, Mr. Speaker, I hope you are the chair of a committee of these procedures. Please kindly note with a lot of indulgence. Number three, Mr. Speaker, I have seen also a proposal, and I wish Senator Metu would be listening to this very keenly. Mr. Speaker, I think Senator Metu is listening because he's the chairperson of Environment and Natural Resources, where they are proposed that if you are a chairperson, you should not sit in CPAC and sipping, Mr. Speaker. I don't know, maybe in the wisdom, in the wisdom, Mr. Speaker, he's saying he's ready to forgo chairmanship to be able to still sit in the cabinet. But I can see he's consulting majority leader. So, Mr. Speaker, I think the essence is allowed to make sure, Mr. Speaker, there is efficiency and effectiveness of a committee. It is not that chairmen of various committees do not have capacity to sit in those committees, but it is because the nature of CPIC and CPAC, Mr. Speaker, is that we sit daily from Monday to Friday. And Mr. Speaker, you are aware we have backlogs of audit queries of many years. Even we are not updated in 2023, 2024, Mr. Speaker. So on this one, I know majority and minority leaders have consulted on this extensively. Mr. Speaker, number three, Mr. Speaker, on my contribution is the use of subcommittees. I want to inform this House, and Senator Otsosi will be in agreement with me, and also Senate's County Public Accounts Committee, Mr. Speaker, we have agreed that to ensure we come with the latest and clear backlog of audit queries in counties, Mr. Speaker, as we go for this working recess, we shall form the subcommittees, Mr. Speaker. Finally, Mr. Speaker, on dormant committees, so that I allow colleagues also to make because this is a procedural matter, is on the inactive members of the committees and dormant members, Mr. Speaker. I think majority and minority need to guide us, Mr. Speaker, on how we can handle this issue. And I agree, Mr. Speaker, in the ruling in the last session on David Ochieng, the MP of Ugenya, at that time the national NASA, was it called NASA? I think NASA coalition wanted to de-whip him. And his argument in the ruling of Justin Biden Muturi, the current AG, ruled that in an upshot of his ruling, Mr. Speaker, when David Ochieng was being de-whipped, and I know Senator Otsosi was in that session, the speaker then, Justin Bundi Muturi, ruled that at least every member of parliament, either a senator or member of National Assembly, must be at least in one committee. So with this insight, I think also we should propose, and I know Senator Metu will support this, we should propose that if you are a member of PIC or PAC, you should only be in one committee. You should not be any other committee, so that you are able to channel your energies where it should be, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the upshot, and I think finally on implementation, I agree that let committees follow up on the resolutions. There is always a matrix on how they can implement, Mr. Speaker. I know we have argued, even in the last session, Mr. Speaker, even at the beginning of this session, we have always, let's have an implementation committee to follow on recommendation. But when we ask and we have been consulting, we thought if it is PIC, Senate CPIC, who should, or CPAC, or Agriculture Committee to follow up on resolutions, Mr. Speaker, then I think we need to agree on how the implementation committee, Mr. Speaker. And I agree that on this implementation committee, we must agree as a House and allow these resolutions, Mr. Speaker, to be done by individual committees. The reporting mechanism, Mr. Speaker, I don't know, because I know you chair this committee, is to look at the reporting mechanisms. Because, for example, if today we say Kakamega County, Mr. Speaker, we say Kakamega County, for example, PAC, Senate Public Accounts Committee, where his governor appeared last week, recommends that EACC follows up on a matter. So how do we ensure, Mr. Speaker, that EACC has implemented the directions of the committee? So I think those are issues I want to throw to members to agree with, Mr. Speaker, because how do we ensure reporting mechanism? How can committee know, Mr. Speaker, that in our recommendations or directions, has it been adhered to? So we need to ensure that there is reporting mechanism, Mr. Speaker, and I want, Mr. Speaker, on liaison, I agree that there should be a vice chair so that it is easy, especially you and Deputy Speaker, to allow you to efficiently, among the chairpersons of the liaison, they sit, Mr. Speaker, but in future, also, we should consider as the vice chairpersons, also to have our own liaison committee, Mr. Speaker, and I'll propose to be the chair of the vice chairpersons of the committees, Mr. Speaker. But the upshot of this cleanup or recommendations is very beautiful, Mr. Speaker. We need to agree and move forward. With those many remarks, Mr. Speaker, allow me, and I beg to second this report or the motion that has been tabled by the committee. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Manzo. Honorable Senators, I will now proceed to propose the question, which is that pursuant to Standing Orders 267, 268, 270, the Senate approved the second report of the Procedure and Rules Committee on the review of the Standing Orders of the Senate laid on the table of the Senate on Wednesday, 22nd May 2024, and that pursuant to the provisions of Article 124(1) of the Constitution and Standing Orders 270 and 272, resolves to amend its standing orders as contained in Annex 1 of the report, and 2, orders that the amendments to the standing orders as contained in Annex 1 to the report come into effect on the 25th of June 2024. Honorable Manzo, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, under Article 124 of the Constitution, the House or each House of Parliament is mandated to establish committees and make standing orders for the orderly conduct of the proceedings, including the proceedings of the committees. Mr. Speaker, the standing orders apply for the House and at the same time apply for the business which goes on in the committees, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the standing orders are like a law, just like an act of Parliament. And, Mr. Speaker, the standing orders also are not cast on stone, and therefore can be amended from time to time, just like it has been proposed this time. Under Standing Order 237, Mr. Speaker, when petitions are presented, there has been a practice of comments. And then, at the same time, a report will be presented and the comments will still ensue. Although, Mr. Speaker, the main idea of brief comments on petitions was to guide the House or to give a general view to the committee, Mr. Speaker, it has ended up in consuming a lot of time for the House. And a lot of times will go up to 4 p.m. or 4:30 before we go into the main business, which are the bills. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I want to agree with the committee that this saves time of the House, and therefore the House will utilize that time to do more business and especially legislative. Although it had its own place before it was reviewed, Mr. Speaker, that would be very useful into a committee. But again, how useful, Mr. Speaker? Sometimes those comments may not even, end up constituting the main part of the report, as the committee will still have to do its work. So I think, Mr. Speaker, the moves by the committee have been very positive, and it's to make this House efficient, make this House serve devolution and Kenyans much better. Mr. Speaker, I support.
Senator Chiranke, so why do you want to speak against Senator, and you are the one who seconded this particular motion? Senator Mungatana.
Thank you, Mr.
A
Speaker.
deliberate error, Senator.
Mr. Speaker, I have looked at the proposals on the amendments on the procedure to present petitions in the House. And Mr. Speaker, I know that the chairman of JLAC has spoken on many other amendments, but I particularly want to mention this proposed amendment. Because, Mr. Speaker, the current procedure now, where the committee receives a petition, and you know, Mr. Speaker, a petition is not like a normal thing. It's not a normal thing that comes before this House. A petition normally, Mr. Speaker, originates from citizens who have failed to get their justice. And it always says the matter is not in court. And they say that they have tried to do this and the other and it has not succeeded. So a petition is like a special way to approach the Senate. Mr. Speaker, the current procedure where if the petition has been negatived by the committee, the standing committee where it has been referred to, the report just merely tables that it's negatived and there is no debate. So the matter ends there. That procedure, Mr. Speaker, is really lacking. I particularly like this amendment that says whatever the committee finds and the committee files that report comes to the House as a motion. Mr. Speaker, I think that was a beautiful, a very superior amendment to how to deal with petitions. Why so, Mr. Speaker? Because when the amendment now comes before the House as a motion, we have the opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to debate it. And the citizens who have listened to, who have presented this petition before the House are able to hear the arguments for and against whatever their petition is, so that, Mr. Speaker, the matter is prosecuted with severity and the weight in which the people who have presented the petition have approached it. Mr. Speaker, petitions on land matters, for example, you hear people, the committee has negatived that petition. The person who presented the petition may have presented it as a person, but it is affecting hundreds or even thousands of people who would want to listen to what happened. So, Mr. Speaker, I think the procedure that forces now whatever the petitioner, the committees have found out, to be brought to the House for debate as a motion, I think it's a very beautiful amendment that needs to be supported. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the chair of the JLAC for that particular amendment on petitions. And, Mr. Speaker, with those
many remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to support. Thank you.
Senator Osotsi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to also make my comments on the motion on proposed amendments to the standing orders of Senate. Mr. Speaker, the standing order number 267 provides that the committee procedure and rules may at any time propose amendments to the standing orders. Mr. Speaker, this was important because we are living in a changing world, changing scenarios, and we may have a situation where it is important for us to change our standing orders so that they are aligned to the current realities that we are facing as a House. Mr. Speaker, I fully support the amendment so that this House has an opportunity to debate and make resolutions on petitions. Because, Mr. Speaker, petition is a very important tool, a legislative tool, and the practice in this House has been that once a petition is committed to a committee, and the committee makes a report, and it tables the report, it ends there. Mr. Speaker, this amendment will allow this House to have an opportunity to debate the report of the committee and approve the resolutions that are proposed by the committee. Mr. Speaker, this is important because some petitions contain very weighty matters, and it is important that those weighty matters are made as a House collectively. Mr. Speaker, there is also the issue of ascertaining the presence of quorum before a voice vote is taken. Mr. Speaker, I've seen on many occasions in this House when sometimes we don't have quorum and a voice vote is put and a matter before us is passed by this House. I think this amendment will allow this House not to get to a risk situation where someone who is very keen can take this Senate to court when we pass a law without sufficient quorum before us. So this will help us in this regard so that we are able to avoid scenarios where we can be taken to court. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of the implementation committee, I think I hold a contrary view. I have read the report by the committee, and I am not convinced by the reasons stated by the committee on the need to have the implementation committee. Because they have cited budgetary reasons, they have cited that the parent committee can do that. But, Mr. Speaker, there are so many issues that arise in this House which are not necessarily issues before the committee. For example, when cabinet secretaries appear before us and they make undertakings to this committee, who is supposed to follow up on that? So, Mr. Speaker, I think that this issue of having an implementation committee is a very justifiable issue and is an issue that maybe we need a rethink. The committee on House procedure and rules needs to relook at this matter. Because even if you look at the other jurisdiction, the implementation committee is very critical. The House of Representatives in equivalent countries, Commonwealth countries like Nigeria, has an implementation committee. In India, the Committee on Government Assurances handles all resolutions of the House on a day-to-day basis. Mr. Speaker, even here in Uganda, they have a Committee on Government Assurances. In Ghana, Parliament of Ghana, the same. So I think it's important for us to relook at this matter, because I know for sure, Mr. Speaker, most of these committees that we have here, they handle current matters. They don't go back and start looking at what was proposed and has not been implemented. So we need to have a committee that sits in there that handles all resolutions, all undertakings that have been made to this House, and all the assurances that have been made to this House. In the last, I served in the National Assembly, 12th Parliament, and I was the Vice Chair of the Implementation Committee. And Mr. Speaker, I noticed that Implementation Committee performs another role above the issue of following up on recommendation or resolutions of the House. It also performs, it's an appeal mechanism for the House, where a committee makes resolutions, someone goes to court as a result of those resolutions, and or comes to the House with a new petition questioning the resolution of the House, then that is taken to the Implementation Committee to provide appeal mechanism, so that we have an internal appeal mechanism, so that we don't provide an opportunity for people to go to court on every issue. So, Mr. Speaker, if we really want to enhance parliamentary powers in this country, supremacy of parliament, I think we must have a proper mechanism of how we are going to ensure that whatever we pass in our houses is going to be implemented. Mr. Speaker, most of the things we pass in this House and the other House are never implemented. A case in point, Mr. Speaker, this House passed a resolution on the issue of pensions, non-remitted pension by county governments, estimated to be 80 billion shillings. Mr. Speaker, I was surprised this week that the Attorney General, who was directed by this House to gazette a task force to implement that, went ahead, instead of gazetting the task force, he went ahead and he wrote to the committee questioning the resolution of the committee. These are the challenges that we are facing, Mr. Speaker. So if we have a substantive committee that exists, whose role is only to follow up on the resolution of the House, we'll make progress. Mr. Speaker, it is also important that we have administrative mechanisms within Parliament to follow up on the implementation of a resolution, so that once this House passes a resolution, we must have a unit within Parliamentary Service Commission whose role, just like the Budget Office, whose role is to manage the resolutions that are made in this House. Other parliaments, Mr. Speaker, they have what we call the Monitoring and Evaluation Unit that does that. In this Parliament, we don't have. And yet, that is the most important unit that this Parliament should have. A special unit whose role is to administratively deal with the resolutions that are passed by this House, with undertakings that are made before this House, and reports back to this House. Maybe in that case, Mr. Speaker, we may not need an implementation committee. But a scenario where we have no administrative unit to handle that, and then we don't have an implementation committee, Mr. Speaker, many of the things that we pass in this House will be in vain. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of oversight committees, where there was a request to enhance the numbers of these committees so that they are able to fast-track their work and be able to be current in terms of how they engage with the counties. Mr. Speaker, I fully support that proposal, although the committee rejected that proposal on budgetary reasons. Mr. Speaker, the committee of CPIC had 11 members, just 2 more members than other committees. And the reason was that they can have flexibility to establish subcommittees and do parallel meetings and be able to catch up. Mr. Speaker, I think we need to revisit that issue so that we help oversight committees be able to be current. And I want to say that even though we have 9 members, the committee of CPIC and CPAC, we will be the first committees which are going to start questioning the governors who are in office now on their reports. With effect from August, we will now start dealing with the 2022-2023 finance year, so that by the time we finish our 5 years, we will have at least done up to the year 2025-2026. Mr. Speaker, this is important because we are having a problem questioning a governor on the financial statements of another governor who has already left office. It becomes very difficult. So the only solution here is to fast-track the work, the reports before us, so that before one leaves the office, Mr. Speaker, we have cleared with his reports and he can go in peace. And Mr. Speaker, I have also seen a proposal, amendment to the Constitution by Senator Chimera, that governors should not run as senators. I think that, to me, although the bill is not before us here for debate, to me, it is something we need to look at, but it is something that arises because we are not able to do our work. If we did our work and ensured the reports are done, and those who have questions, maybe we can have a mechanism of vetting so that they cannot be allowed to contest for seats. But those who are cleared by this House, they should be allowed to contest any seat. Mr. Speaker, I don't see any problem with a governor becoming a senator if he has been cleared by this House, or a senator becoming a governor, like my friend Boni Halwale here, who is going to become the governor. So, Mr. Speaker, it is the issue of the speeding up the processing of the oversight committee report is very important, and the answers lie in expanding the members slightly so that they can have subcommittees, and also having members who are committed. There was a proposal that you should not belong to another committee. Mr. Speaker, they can belong to other committees, but they need to be committed. They need to be there to read volumes and volumes of documents. If we have members of this committee who are not committed, then we will not be able to catch up. Mr. Speaker, I don't mean that my members are not committed. My members in PIC are very committed, and that is why we have done so many reports. Still on the Oversight Committee, the issue of budgets. Mr. Speaker, it is not fair that CPIC and CPAC have the same budget as other committees. These are committees that deal with so many reports, and reports that require a lot of input, a lot of study, and therefore, they need to have adequate resources, budgetary resources, to do the reports. I have run out of my budget as a committee, and therefore I can't process any more reports. So if we have the same budget, and considering that budgets have been slashed, it becomes very easy, Mr. Speaker, to achieve our objective. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of parliamentary party, the request to amend the standing orders to define a parliamentary party, I want to agree with the committee on their final decision that a parliamentary party can have 5 members, but that parliamentary party should not belong to a coalition. Mr. Speaker, I think this request was made in view of the Jubilee Party. Jubilee Party, yes, they have a right to get out of Azimio coalition, but they must do that within the law, because the documents that are there indicate that Jubilee is still legally a member of the Azimio coalition until they exhaust all the legal mechanisms, including the court process, so that they can become independent from Azimio. So the amendment is fair to both parties, because the amendment is saying that they can become a parliamentary party, but they should not belong to a coalition, which is fair, unlike the request that was made, which said that a party can have 5 members and becomes a parliamentary party. Mr. Speaker, we also need to discuss what are the privileges of parliamentary parties. Because in the National Assembly, I've seen that there is a party of 17 members which has been allowed to appoint a whip alongside the minority whip. Mr. Speaker, if we allow these kind of things, we'll be creating confusion in our houses because there can only be two leadership sides, the minority and majority side. If the minority side has a minority whip, the other side should have a majority whip. We do not want a scenario where we have another layer in between. It creates confusion, and Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the committee for being wise and making a recommendation that, parliamentary parties must not be members of, they must first of all meet the criteria of 5 members and should not belong to a coalition of parties. On the issue of statements, the format of statements, Mr. Speaker, I think I support the request that was made that a statement must have a background. The statements we do in this House, Mr. Speaker, do not have a background, and sometimes when they are sent to the people who are supposed to respond, they end up not responding adequately or capturing the basis of the statement because the background is not there or is not inadequate. It is not adequate. So I think it's important for the background to be there, stating the facts of the case, and then the questions or the issues that need to be undertaken are stated after that. Mr. Speaker, I think it's important for us to continually improve on our standing orders, to make them better, and to line them to the realities of our parliament. So for those very many remarks, Mr. Speaker, I want to support these amendments that have been proposed and request that we need to have a rethink on this issue of implementation. How do we want to do it? Not just in this House, even administratively, within our system of Parliamentary Service Commission. How do we deal with the issue of implementing the resolution of the House? And the resolution of the House are quite diverse, including the budgetary resolutions that we pass in this House. Mr. Speaker, including undertakings that are made in this House, even undertakings that are made to committees. How will they be followed up? That is very important. Mr. Speaker, I support.
Senator Dulo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move an amendment to the motion that is before the House. Mr. Speaker, in paragraph 1, by inserting the following words immediately after the word report, subject to deletion of the word not in a coalition with another party, appearing in the proposed amendment to Standing Orders number 2 on page 33 of the report. Mr. Speaker, I am actually requesting to amend this so that political parties can have a freedom of being on their own and also being within the coalition. And I think this is a freedom that we seek. And this will actually help in sorting out the challenges, Mr. Speaker, we face within the coalition, and I think this will also give association by political parties within different parties. And again, Mr. Speaker, even within a coalition, if you are 5 members, you can be able, Mr. Speaker, to belong to a political party. And I think that will help a lot. With that, Mr. Speaker, I would request Senator Kakamega to second. I thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to second the amendment. And Mr. Speaker, listening very carefully to the spirit in this letter of the amendment, it is attempting to write something that standing orders are not explicit on. Namely, once you walk through this door, stand there and you are sworn in as a senator, you must be able to enjoy all the committees in this House. You must be able to enjoy all the privileges that are extended to members for purposes of making their work easier. And therefore, since this amendment is curing exactly that, I support it strongly. Mr. Speaker, we now have an opportunity whereby reports of committees with very strong recommendations lie on the shelves with not too much that we can move concerning our counties. Statements from members are worked on by committees. Recommendations are made, but no action is taken. Mr. Speaker, with this amendment, both the first one and the second one, whereby we are now introducing the implementation committee, it means that those reports of committees will have a chance to be acted upon by the Committee on Implementation. I support this amendment, Mr. Speaker, sir. I second.
Honorable Senators, I'll now proceed to propose the question, which is that the motion, Senator Wakili, you should know better, that the motion be amended in paragraph 1 by inserting the following words immediately after the word report, subject to deletion of the words not in a coalition with another party, appearing in the proposed amendment to Standing Order number 2 on page 33 of the report. Senator Faki.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipa fursa hii kuchangia ripoti ya kamati ya taratibu za bunge kuhusiana na mabadiliko ya kanuni za bunge. Mheshimiwa Spika, ningependa kusema kwamba ripoti imezungumzia kwa ufasaha mambo kadhaa, lakini mimi nitagusia mambo mawili peke yake. Kwanza ni kwamba
Senator Faki, we are now debating the amendments, the motion on the amendments as proposed by Senator Dulo. Senator Majority Leader, the motion on the floor is the motion of amendment. That is the motion that we are supposed to debate.
No, Chair,
we finalize on that matter, and then we can resume debate on the original motion in whatever form, depending on the outcome of this particular vote. So what is before us now is the motion as proposed by Senator Dulo.
Thank you, Chair. I had no intention of supporting or debating the amendment.
No, honorable senators, I see no senator wishing to, Senator Mungatana.
Mr. Speaker, I listened to the Honorable Senator Dulo when she was moving these amendments, and I listened very carefully, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to agree with the sentiments that every senator who walks into this House and takes that oath is entitled to participate fully in the activities of this House. Mr. Speaker, irrespective of the external politics, the party politics, every senator who walks into this House, Mr. Speaker, especially those ones who are elected by delegation, they should participate in committees, Mr. Speaker. They should make their contribution, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, this amendment is helping us towards achieving that particular goal. And this is what we want. We should not have rules that are limiting participation of elected senators, Mr. Speaker, people who have come here by the voice and the vote of the people. Mr. Speaker, irrespective of whatever politics that are happening outside, this amendment is giving that power to allow full participation of members in various committees. And Mr. Speaker, this is a beautiful amendment. It's a kind of amendment that helps us to go forward rather than backward. It's a kind of amendment that is opening doors for us to, as a House, benefit from the wisdom of those colleagues who are elected, and for whatever reason, they could be having issues with their arrangements of politics outside the House. So, Mr. Speaker, I rise to fully support that amendment and ask all members to support. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Prof. Kamar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand to support the amendment that has been introduced by Senator Dulo for the one reason that in democratic parliaments, there should be allowance for people to make decisions and to make moves of their own choice. Mr. Speaker, it becomes very difficult when we lock the system through our own standing orders and forbid members who may wish not to be aligned to any political party or any political coalition. I therefore support that it is good for us within the House to know that once we are in the House, there is, for democracy to prevail, we should allow members to exercise their duty and right of association within the House itself. So, Mr. Speaker, I would like to support that this amendment be included so that we allow for that room. It may be today that those of us who are in Jubilee have found ourselves in an awkward situation, but it could be another group tomorrow. So for the House, it is very important that the House has that flexibility, that the House allows for that democratic movement so that coalitions can be brought in and out in a very democratic manner. For that, I support, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Rober.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support Senator Dulo's amendment, proposed amendment. Mr. Speaker, it is also in that same spirit to make sure that no senator is brought to chambers, either special elected or elected through the ballot, and made redundant, that they cannot participate in certain activities because maybe of their political affiliations, especially now that we have all these alliances. But, Mr. Speaker, it's in the same spirit that, and I think maybe the train left the station for me. I don't know why I did not bring also an amendment, because it is in that same spirit, Mr. Speaker, that I think also the specially elected senators who have been elected to represent women, working groups, people with disabilities, Mr. Speaker, they should be allowed to participate in all possible activities, Mr. Speaker, including voting, Mr. Speaker. As you know, the specially elected senators, because of our standing orders, as we fall on a delegation, it is only the elected chair of the delegation who gets to vote on certain issues. But, Mr. Speaker, I think on matters concerning, let's say, working groups or women or even people with disability, Mr. Speaker, there should be a way that we are progressive enough to say that at that point then all the nominated senators who are nominated under, let's say, the special interest group of gender should be able to cast a vote, or people with disability, or even the working groups. Because, Speaker, I think even most senators don't know that there are senators who have been specially elected to represent working groups, Mr. Speaker, and they sit in chambers, but they do not have a vote, Mr. Speaker. As a matter of fact, in this spirit of supporting Senator Dulo's amendment, such that alliances and coalitions are not put out in terms of participation in committees, Mr. Speaker, there needs to be a conversation, either through Kamkunji or otherwise, on the nominated senators like us, what is really our actual duty, because sometimes it appears that we are redundant, And it appears that we have been sworn in to come and just be body count here, Mr. Speaker. So as I've said, the train has left the station, and I do not know why I did not bring my amendment, but Mr. Speaker, I thought I should voice this out so that as we support Senator Dulo in her Jubilee affairs, she should also remember that when we bring as nominated senators representing women or special interest groups, she should remember as an elected senator that we have supported her in this one, and she should support us when we are fighting for our rights on the Senate oversight, and as well as support us when we are fighting for our rights on voting. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Chiranke.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the amendment by Senator Dulo. I think this amendment originates from the spirit, the letter, and the principle of Constitutional 2010. Mr. Speaker, no Kenyan, be it elected or not elected, should be denied the sacrosanct right to associate with anybody, Mr. Speaker. I think the era of Kipande system that happened during pre- and colonial times should not be allowed. Article 38 on political rights, everybody has a right to associate, not only at the given specific timeline, but within even a short time, Mr. Speaker. We know the politics of the country and parties change even within a week, within a year, within 5 years, 2 years, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, is it that same spirit that every member of this House, and you know we are the House of Union, Mr. Speaker, today I was having a conversation with some of the working groups in this country, and they was telling me the credibility of the Senate as the upper house of Parliament of the Republic of Kenya is in high all time, Mr. Speaker. And therefore I want to support Senator Dulo with this amendment that they should be allowed to individually, any member of the Senate, whether you are elected through Azimio, through Kenya Kwanza, through Jubilee, you have a right, Mr. Speaker, to be part of the participation, Mr. Speaker. Even the deputy party leader of Democratic People's Party, Dr. Alex Munyi Mundigi, Mr. Speaker, should be given the right of freedom of association and political rights as envisaged in the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. So the upshot of this amendment will allow the ease of running even committees, Mr. Speaker. Because at the end of the day, no senator, Mr. Speaker, with the freedom of association, political rights, and in the spirit of Article 1 of the Constitution of Kenya, no senator should feel lesser simply because they come from either minority or majority. Every member of the Senate, Mr. Speaker, and I hope the nominated specially elected senators are listening to this, including Professor Kamar, should feel that they are part of the decision makings of the committees and plenary sessions in this House, Mr. Speaker. I have heard what Senator Orwaba has said on the decisions of the Senate as per Article 123. Mr. Speaker, I'm bringing a constitutional amendment bill. I hope Senator Orwaba, when I bring that amendment, should include, because I propose under Article 123 of the Constitution to amend, Mr. Speaker, so that the decisions of the Senate, Mr. Speaker, can you protect me from Senator Metu is moving my notes to distract me, Mr. Speaker, but tunasema ashindwe. Mr. Speaker, what we are saying in short, in an upshot, is these decisions can be made, Mr. Speaker. With those very, very many remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to support and allow this, we move to other agenda of the day, Mr. Speaker. I support.
Now, honorable senators, there being no other senator wishing to contribute on the proposed amendments, and pursuant to Standing Order 97, 1(2)(c), where the mover has no has no right to reply, I will proceed to straight away put the question, which is that the motion be amended in paragraph 1 by inserting the following words immediately after the words report, subject to deletion of the words not in a coalition with another party appearing in the proposed amendments to Standing Order number 2 on page 33 of the report. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Now, honorable senators, I will have now to again propose the question as amended, so that debate will ensue on the motion in the amended form. So I will now proceed to put the question as amended. That pursuant to Standing Orders 267, 268, and 270, the Senate approves the second report of the Procedure and Rules Committee on the review of the Standing Orders of the Senate, laid on the table of the Senate on Wednesday, 22nd May 2024, and that pursuant to the provisions of Article 124(1) of the Constitution and the Standing Orders 270 and 272. 1. Resolve to amend its standing orders as contained in Annex 1 of the report, subject to deletion of the words "not in a coalition with another party," appearing in the proposed amendment to the Standing Order number 2 on page 33 of the report. And second, orders that the amendments to the standing orders as contained in Annex 1 to the report come into effect on the 25th of June 2024. Honorable Senators, you may proceed to debate the motion as amended.